So we're going to talk about bitterness and particularly forgiveness. This is one of the things people find under the hood when they go looking for the source of their anger. And just a few things that Krissel says in his book to get us kind of rolling on this. And this first comment isn't in the book. Why don't you bring that next slide up? This is going to sound extremely insensitive and hard for you to process, so I want to just put this out there that we're starting kind of with our foot's in the gas here, okay? Let me read this to you. Hatred, however justifiable it seems, is just as sinful as the offense that harmed you. Now, everyone that thinks that was tough, nod your head. Yeah. Okay, we're going to build on this a little bit, but this is a key thing that released me into a future that I never knew was waiting for me. When I grasped this principle, that it wasn't saying what was done to me was not bad. It was just my awareness and understanding that I did not have a right in God's kingdom to hate someone who hurt me. And hatred was my sin. Okay, now I said, foot's in the gas, isn't it? Alright? The cause of the hurt, it was truly wrong, it was unjustifiable, it was maybe unprovoked. Let's call it evil. Sometimes those things happen and we permit ourselves bitterness. You know, we kind of think that because what was done to me is truly evil, I'm allowed to be hateful or bitter in response. Well, and the truth is you are. If you want to be. You can be. Trust me. You can go to town with that. Bitterness grows in the soil of ignored hurt, but the hurt isn't the sin, just the way we responded to it. I think this is crucial that I want to just pause real quick and say to you that there are some things that we need to bring to Jesus, as Will has been talking about some of this stuff from the pulpit. This has been kicking around in my mind. That some of the stuff we need to deal with, it isn't sin. You realize it's not a sin to be wounded, right? Okay, you with me? What that was done to you, it sucked. It was bad. It was wrong. It's not wrong to be hurt. Your wound isn't the problem. How we process and deal with the wound, that's a different issue, but that evil thing that was done to you is evil. It's okay to be hurt. It's okay to be hurt. One of the things he says in the book is that bitterness divides and separates. He makes this comment, is that bitterness never draws us closer to God. Bitterness never draws us closer to God. It always overflows on others. One of the things I found with bitterness, and that, one of the things I found with bitterness is that with this, you end up re-offending yourself. Because what do? You replay the tape, right? You guys, you've been hurt, so you're with me on this. You've been hurt, and what do? You walk back through it how many times a day? I can't believe they said that thing to me. I should have. Right? Well, what happens is you actually piss yourself off. That person is dead, maybe. It happened 20 years ago, but guess what's still happening? That offense feels like it happened yesterday. Why? Because you kept it fresh. You kept remembering it. Hebrews 12:15 says, watch out that no poisonous root of bitterness grows up to trouble you, corrupting many. That last part of the verse is the one that actually really helped me in this process. I mentioned it already. But this root of bitterness, poisonous root of bitterness, it was not bitterness. It wasn't just troubling me. Now, I've said this before, but there was a day when my dad called, which he never did. Any of you guys remember phones with cords? Yes. So, because I'm a pacer, as you can tell, I had one of those. Anybody remember the days of the 15-foot long boingy cords? Yeah. All right. So I had one of them. I was working that cord because my dad was on the other end of the phone. I was unhooked. Okay? And he actually, the first time I know he ever did this, he called and asked what my kids wanted for Christmas. I could see that hallway at this very moment. I remember this day. And I was working that corridor. Man, I was getting more and more. And I was headed back to the phone like this. It was going through the wall. And God, I stopped. You know, should probably say this. You know what stopped me? It was going to hurt like hell. I knew it. But I was the type of person, I hit things and hurt myself because you thought about what it was going to do to you after you did it. And I remember turning around and there was my wife with my first child on the floor. And I saw fear in my wife's face. And that corrupting many destroyed me. I saw fear in the face of the woman I loved. Like she had to protect my little one. I hung up the phone, and because I love humor, it helps me get through things. I said, so, hon, think I have a problem with my dad? Because I love profound statements like that. Roots have extensive reach. They push through almost any wall and grow more entangled with time. The more we feed them, the more the roots grow.
That's good.
It moves out into your life. You guys, you know how you walk down the sidewalk and the sidewalk's doing this? Sometimes it's because of the freeze, and sometimes it's because there's roots underneath there. They've grown. Kicked everything out of order. It's all messed up. Bitterness, let's call it resentment. Let's call it spite. Let's call it harshness. Seething internalized anger, grudges, defensiveness. It presents as scorn and condescension and criticism, and it troubles you. That word speaks of harassment or a hounding. You know what it's like to be hounded by hurt? By anger? By bitterness? Be hounded by it. Tormented. Chronically annoyed. Pestered. Okay? And that corrupting concept is actually the concept of contamination. That's our soul detox idea. Corrupting many. That's actually what that word is talking about. And I looked up this idea of many, and this is talking to like I'll use a verb, tons, okay? Lots. It's an extensive reach. It gets, and it just goes. Remember I told you anger leaks, okay? Bitterness leaks. Sin always leaks on others. You have never and never will sin in a closet. That is just the most confusing and wrong concept. Your sin always hurts other people. Always. And wounding ends up being like that too. Not a sin, but... So I'm gonna say something to you that I don't really mean. Can I kind of sort of like lie right here? But if I tell you I'm gonna lie, it's permitted, right? No. Okay. The question is, what do you do with bitterness? I have a slide for that. That's sort of a lie. But I want you to get this point because I already made it to you, so I'm making it again. Bitterness isn't the problem. Why are you bitter? What happened? What caused you to respond that way? Pop the hood. What you have to do is trace back down those roots. Have you ever tried to dig a root out, a tree out, or a bush? You know what taproot is? It's that center big one. And you chop 89 roots off, and that shrub just stick looking at it. Yeah. Show me what you got. It ain't moving. When you dig around enough, you get down deep enough, and you find that central key root, and you get that thing cut out. You pick it up with a hand and throw it aside. Because that's you've got to trace down to those. To get to the roots of bitterness, you have to trace down to that taproot and find out where it's coming from. So the question is, if we do nothing with bitterness, so what do we do if we trace down the back roots and we find the source of that bitterness? Because that's what we need to deal with. What do we do with it? And it's a simple one-word solution that isn't simple at all. And today we're going to talk about forgiveness. Bitterness can only be healed with forgiveness. So in my 20, almost 30 years of pastoral work here, and in my own experience, I found that there are a lot of misconceptions about what forgiveness is. I had wrong ideas about it. The people I've worked with had wrong ideas. And I started making a list. And I actually have a booklet that I produced and bound like your notes are. And I've dealt with forgiveness so much that when people come into counseling, I give them my booklet and say, call me when you've read it. Because I want to talk about 10 things forgiveness is not. And when I'm done with it, you'll really kind of have an idea of some of what forgiveness is, but we're going to tell you what it is too. And we're going to tell you 10 things forgiveness is not. Alright, so let's have number 1. Forgiveness is not a feeling. No, that's real profound. You didn't see that coming, I know, but if you wait until you feel like forgiving, who wants to guess when you'll really... If you wait till you feel like it, when are you going to do it? Never. You don't have to feel like it. In fact, the thing about forgiveness is you will most likely not feel like it. You know you need to forgive when you don't feel like it. Okay? You're not going to feel like it. Now, forgiveness is also not denial. It's not pretending it didn't happen. It's not pretending it didn't hurt. It's not pretending it wasn't evil. It's not ignoring it, acting like it isn't out there. I mean, denial is what I call a coping mechanism that helps us get on with life. And sometimes, in the short term, denial, it does help us get through a hard period. But you cannot live in denial, or you'll never forgive. It is what it is, and you got to call it what it is. This one seems a little obvious, but I can't tell you how many times I have had to try to unpack this one for people. Forgiveness is not approval. One of the ways we cope with a wound is we try to excuse the other person in some way, especially with someone really close to us, a parent maybe, or someone we really love. We try to, it's okay. My children are here, but in our home, you know, if your parents, you've said to one of your children, oh, Johnny, tell your sister you're sorry, right? So, Johnny, you know, I'm sorry. And the sister, well, it's okay. I stop him right there. I say, oh, well, Susie, then he could do it again, right? Well, you said it was okay. My kids will repeat this. They can regurgitate this whole conversation for you, okay? No, it wasn't okay. You need to forgive him. You need to say, I'm sorry, or I forgive you. The one says, I'm sorry. The other has to say, I don't care if they mean it or not. Okay? They have to learn the discipline of the right response. My kids probably won't say it's okay to you. If you apologize to them, they'll go, yeah, that really sucked, man. They might say that to you. But, I forgive you. Well, I hope that's the way they respond. Every parent hopes that's the way they respond, okay? It's not approval. It's not forgetting. This one seems really obvious. It seems really obvious, but that whole expression out there, forgiveness is forgetting, is malarkey. It is baloney. You are never going to forget. You want to forget, maybe, but you won't. Now, what I have experienced is that those memories get dimmer. And I've experienced that when you remember it, it doesn't wreck you anymore. It doesn't well this thing up and take you over and cause this reaction when you do remember. You remember it and you're able to go, yeah, that was bad, but I'm behind that. It's not forgetting. Forgiveness is not, you're not going to forget. You don't have to forget to forgive. It's not disingenuous to say you forgave because you don't, because you still remember it. I mean, how is that even, think about the way your mind works. How would that even work? Someone wounds you deeply and you're supposed to forget it happened? Dang, I still got the scar. How am I going to forget that? You got a constant reminder. You got a little limp in your life because you've been wounded. The goal is that we close up the open, gaping, oozing pushish wounds. But you're going to have a scar. Forgiveness is not trust. I have a story I tell about this, an illustration that came to my mind a while back, but let's say I took my darling children to a babysitter. And I come back to pick children up after my wife and I have had a wonderful date. And there's ambulances and fire trucks all around the house, rush in, find out that the child fell in the pool and almost drowned. Luckily the child's okay, because we're going to make the story end well. 2 questions. Do I have to forgive the babysitter?
Yes.
Okay, you with me on that one? Do I take the child back to that babysitter?
No.
Is my point well enough made? Forgiveness is not trust. You're an idiot if you trust them again. Once burnt, twice shy, right? No, that's not saying grace and compassion and some of those stuff. I'm not discounting all that. I'm just saying, in order to release the person that you need to forgive, I am not asking you, and God does not ask you, to immediately just go ahead and trust them again. They lost the trust. They have to re-earn the trust.
Yeah.
Okay? It isn't. No one's asking you to trust. Forgiveness isn't even injustice. You know, you can forgive someone and still demand that justice is done in their life. I mean, you can forgive someone who takes the life of a loved one. You have to forgive them. Does that mean you have to drop your charges against them? No. No. Sometimes, when evil has been done, your job is to press charges with a forgiving heart. Pressing charges is going to save somebody else from being wounded, isn't it? Especially if you're talking some sort of sexual type thing where someone's been molested, someone's been raped. Pressing charges might be the thing to do.
Yeah.
But hating them, man, you gotta forgive. Okay, forgiveness is not tolerance. It's not tolerating the bad. You know, sometimes when you forgive, you also have to say, and I forgive you, but you're not allowed in this house with that behavior. That behavior will not happen in my home again. You can forgive somebody and not tolerate them. You understand that? Okay? You don't have to let them continue to be bad in your presence if they're wounding and hurting, especially if you're protecting others. If you're a parent, you're protecting little ones. That person needs to be forgiven, but they may not be able to be let back in the house until they can prove they're So I'm not talking about tolerance. I'm not talking about restraint. Some people think forgiveness is, I'm really mad at Will, but when I'm with him, I got it all like, how you doing, Will? I hate your guts, but you're a great guy. You know, you just got it managed. You got it restrained, right? That's that suppression thing, right? That's not forgiveness. Just because you can, you know, you got it all kind of wrapped up and pushed aside, no one knows that you're really ticked off of that person, that doesn't mean you forgave them. Because you're kind to them, doesn't mean you forgave them. And here's the last one. No, next to the last one. Forgiveness is not reconciliation. This kind of wraps up some of what I've already been saying, okay? Forgiveness is something between you and God. You know what? Forgiveness has very little to do with the offender.
Yeah.
Forgiveness is really about you. You and God. Has very little to do with the person that offended you. Okay. Reconciliation can only happen after forgiveness has occurred. And then trust is re-earned and you work up to. Reconciliation is when you get back together and you regain something that was lost. Maybe it's better in the end than it ever was before. But you don't have to have this immediate reconciliation in order to forgive somebody. A guy that's beaten his wife or something, does the wife have to be forgiving? Yes. That woman may never be able to reconcile that marriage. It sucks, but the guy might just be a wife beater and not care about getting any help. I don't have to reconcile, but I do have to forgive. Now, I need to be willing to reconcile if things change. Right? That's one of those places where, you're going to hear me say this a lot, that's one of those places where I think you need some help. You get someone to help walk through this kind of thing with you, because they'll be able to help you set up some parameters, some boundaries in your life that create safety, so that you don't get back into a situation you don't want to get back into. 10, forgiveness is not painless. Y'all know that by now. It's not painless. And I threw in a freebie for it because I like freebies. It's not the only option. You can be an angry, hateful, miserable person as long as you want. I know, that was a little rude, wasn't it? It's not, really, you don't have to forgive. But you do have to deal with the consequences. All right, we're moving right along. We got like 15 minutes here. I'm going to break my own rules. Does anybody have any questions about what forgiveness is now? Just pause right here real quick.
That was gold. Gold.
Oh, all right. Good. Gold. It was a little cold, wasn't it? Yeah. Woo! I told you. Our foot's in the gas here. It's not going to get any easier because we're going to talk about what forgiveness is. We've got to talk about what is it. If that's what it isn't. A lot of that stuff was in the book, not lined out like I just gave it to you, but he says a lot of that stuff in the book. What I'm going to give you now isn't really in the book. I'm going off the reservation again on this, but I want to tell you what forgiveness is. And if forgiveness isn't a feeling, like I told you to begin with, what it is it's a choice. I mean, there really is no other way to talk to you about forgiveness. I mean, it's going to feel bad. It's going to be bad. It's going to be hard. It's going to hurt. Forgiveness might mean you actually admit to some stuff. You have to take some actions that will create distance between you and a person. You might be actually living too close to someone you need to forgive. Forgiveness and facing the truth might mean you actually separate in some sorts of ways from an offender. Because when you forgive, you really have to deal with reality. Some people think it's inauthentic to do something they don't feel like doing. All right, and this is always what I say to them. I say something like this. So, how many of you feel like going to work on Monday morning? You got a good job? That's great to see.
Depends on Sunday night.
Depends on Sunday night. How about Wednesday morning? How about the day after a vacation? Some of you, all right, good. So let's think about those days when you don't feel like going to work in the morning.
Every day.
Okay, all right. So you got that day. That's the worst day in your life that you would think that having to go to work, right? All right. What do? Okay, so that day you don't feel like going to work, right? What do? Yeah, get it, Greg. You don't feel like it. Why are you doing it?
Because I have to support my family. Yeah.
Oh, because other people are counting on it, aren't they? And what you did is you made a choice. You didn't feel like making it. Oh, I'm right there with you. That's tough. It's tough. Okay.
We getting all this?
But the thing is, though, it's not the job itself, though.
What's that?
For me, it's not the job itself, it's the people.
Okay, yeah.
I just started a week ago at the job I'm at, and the first day I was like bullied because I was the new girl. And it's every day. And so waking up every morning, I'm like, I don't want to be here.
Yeah.
But you have to.
It's because there's you have responsibilities, don't you?
Yeah.
You got to pay the bills. People are counting on you going to work, right? I'm going to say that any of you, don't raise your hand on this. Any of you control freaks? Don't raise your hand. Oh, wow, we got honest people here. All right,
Because we're in control.
That's right. Well, I've got your salvation. I've got a gem for you here, all right? All right? I mean, life is really out of control a lot. So, I'm going to say this to you. Forgiveness is one of the few things in life that you have some control over. It's a choice, right? Forgiveness is one of the few things in life that you have control over. You want control? All right, I'll show you how to exercise it. Forgive. Number one, forgiveness is a choice to acknowledge. I've already kind of beat this up a little bit here. So, people often feel that if the offense was somehow unintended, wasn't meant, the person was having a bad time, a lot of stuff has gone wrong in that person's life, and so I don't have a right to be offended. I mean, you do whatever with that, but my question is, were you offended? And you have to be willing to say, yes. You have to acknowledge an offense before you can deal with it. If you keep pretending it didn't happen and excusing it and finding that, is that offense still in there? Oh yeah. Yeah. But you're doing what with it? Nothing. And what happens to bitterness that's left to eat away at you? It's not wrong to be offended. Why can't we just say, that hurt? I mean, I realize that I didn't hear that right. I know that I overreact. I know that I'm easily wounded when people do this thing or that thing. But, that hurt. Can we just say it all? I'll do one of Will's. Let's all say it together. That hurt. Let's try it again. That hurt. Let's get into that routine. You know, you will be a lot healthier acknowledging the hurts throughout your day than you're going to be trying to pretend they didn't happen. Okay? You've got to acknowledge. As I'm looking at the time, I'm going to just skip over this next. Let me see the next slide for a minute here. Yeah. We're going to skip over that. But the verse is just saying, but when your eye is bad, your whole body is filled with darkness. Okay? So if you can't see well, your whole life, okay? So if you're not admitting things are true, if you're believing lies and denial and that kind of stuff, that's your whole life is a lie. If that's how you look at things, pretending it didn't happen, your whole life is pretend. You don't want to live a pretend life. Oh, I'm good. I'm like a duck. It just rolls off my back. Baloney. That hurt. Let's admit it. Let's admit the truth. Let's come into the light. And I love this. And if the light you think you have is actual darkness, you think you are okay. You've talked yourself into being okay. That's your light. How deep is that darkness? You substituted the truth for a lie. And that means you're living a lie. It hurt. Acknowledge it. It's not wrong to be hurt. It's not wrong to be hurt. Alright, that's a real superficial treatment of that, but let's move on, alright? Forgiveness is a choice to, and I picked another A word for you, absolve. Now, this is the one you expected. My definition, I try to make it real simple. Forgiveness is, I think I got a slide for that too. Forgiveness is a deliberate decision to consider that someone is no longer in debt to you. Okay, you free them from obligation to you. You are choosing to pay the price yourself. That's what forgiveness is. You pay the price, they don't. Yeah. You're ahead of me a little bit. Stealing my notes here, so slow down on me there. Okay, as far as you're concerned, they don't need to correct the wrong. Now, would it be nice if they corrected the wrong? Would it mean a lot to you if they corrected the wrong? Should it be done? But you're no longer holding back on them because they're holding back on you. This is saying that we end all efforts to make sure that they know what they did, to explain in living color how that hurt you. It's giving up your right to tell them what you think about them. It's giving up your right to be heard. As long as you hang on to that right to be heard, you can't forgive because you're rehearsing it. You played out that speech you want to say to that person 100 times. And you keep that hurt just as fresh as it was like it happened an hour ago. every time you rehearse the speech. You're giving up your right to have our day in court. They may still need to have their day in court, but you're giving up your right to your day in court. Okay? You're giving up your right to see them hang their head in shame and realize the truth of how they affected you. Alright? We're laying down our right to hear them say, I'm sorry, you were right, I was wrong, what was I thinking? I'm such a dolt, I'll never do it again. You gotta let that go. You gotta let that go. Would it be nice if they... Yeah, it would, but... It's walking away from the desire to punish and see them suffer. And Henry Nouwen has a quote I just ran across this week. Henry Nouwen is a pretty famous spiritual formation guy. You might not have heard his name before, but let me read you this quote. I don't believe it's in a... Forgiveness is first and foremost an inner movement. It's an act... it's the act of removing anger and bitterness and the desire for revenge from our hearts, and helps us to reclaim our human dignity. It's not up there. No. So I'm going to read it to you again, okay? So forgiveness is first and foremost an inner movement. It's an inner movement. Sorry about not having this in the notes for you. It's kind of lengthy, but it's an act... thank you. It's okay. No, wait, no. All right, it's the act. It's an act. All right, I'm gonna get this right. Oh, that's why I got it wrong. I can fix this right now. It's an act that removes anger, bitterness, and the desire for revenge from the heart. Removing anger, bitterness, and desire for revenge from the heart. And it helps us to reclaim our human dignity. I love that last part. It helps us to claim our human dignity. Because when you are an angry, bitter person, I mean, it's just below you. It creates you. You do all sorts of things that you probably don't even really want to do. Of course, our example is, she stole it, was it Charlene? Charlene, okay. Jesus is our example, right? So it's being Christ-like, or like Christ. Okay? This step is based on Jesus' example of his rescue and forgiveness of us. Our forgiveness of others is based on his free gift of forgiveness, which he offered us while we were still, offending. Forgiveness is not conditional. You're not saying to somebody, I'll forgive you if you stop it. That's not Jesus' example. While we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. Okay? So Jesus is our example here. He's the one that shows us how to do this. Now here's one. Just hang on to this, okay? You have to forgive as often as you're offended. Even if they're still offending you. 70 times 7 was not an exact number. It was just a euphemism for, you keep doing it, there's no end. Because it's not about them, it's about you and your relationship with God. You have to forgive every single offense, no matter what kind it is, no matter who it came from, no matter how often they've done it over again. You have to forgive. Here's something else that this absolving is. We're forfeiting our right to solicit sympathy from others by rehearsing what was done to us, or how noble we are in for having forgiven them. Okay, when you forgive and you let go of the thing, you can't go around telling people about what this person did and trying to get them to, oh, poor baby. You might deserve some of that. Some of that might be helpful at some point, but you're giving up your right to keep that up. You're giving up your right to go, oh yeah, I forgave him. It was awful, but I forgave him. Like all of it. It's choosing to live with the loss without complaint or self-pity or spiritual pride. The third one is difficult too. Forgiveness is a choice to admit. You've heard it said that 2 wrongs never make 1 right. Okay, so in order to forgive, you have to consider your response. How did that thing that was happening to me, how did I respond to it? How am I coping with it? What did I do in return? Did I retaliate tit for tat? No matter what was done to you. This is a tough one. I'm going to still pause in the middle of it while I'm reading it. I'm realizing what I'm going to say, okay? So this is tough, all right? No matter what was done to you. I'm not diminishing what was done to you. No matter what was done to you, it's never okay to react with a sin of our own. I think this was in the notes. 2 wrongs never have and never will make 1 right. Just a bigger wrong. This is the one that really got me. When I was told that I actually had some responsibility in how broken up and messed up I was because of my poor relationship with my dad. And this was my mantra, okay? Ready for this? But you don't know what he did to me. Actually, I was talking to someone with an alcoholic father. He knew. That wasn't the point. That's how I had been holding on to my hatred. But you don't know. You don't understand. If you had been in my shoes, you'd be pissed off too. You don't know what they did to me. And see, that's... the thoughts came into my mind. I don't really want to say, but I'm just going to... It's immaterial what they did to you. When it comes to forgiveness, you don't get to not forgive if the offense was big enough. I'm going to move along here. Let's see. We have to take responsibility for our actions and focus on our own sinful retaliation instead of on the wrong that was done to us. We get so myopically focused on the wrong done to us, we don't even think about how I let it eat away at me and what that did to who I offended. Who's out there wounded and pissed off at me. I'm the offender now. That was the thing that I really had to grasp. Was I'm the offender now. And I'm going, that's not fair! No, it's not. Who said it was fair? Who said that Jesus going to the cross? I mean, I know this is really, feels manipulative. But Jesus is our example. Where is it fair that Jesus died for our sin? Where is that fair? It's crazily unfair. But it led to justification, forgiveness, purity, life. So, anyway, I would throw out a point of truth real quick here because this is another one that really was a problem for me. You can love someone and hate them at the same time. You can love someone and hate them at the same time. In fact, the people you love the most are probably the ones that are going to hurt you the deepest. It's that relationship that makes it possible for them to hurt you that deeply. A stranger on the street goes, oh, you're having a bad hair day, you know? Well, it might not feel good, but you get up and the husband or the wife says that to you, it's a little different, isn't it? Alright, so just remember that. Yes, you do love them. I mean, I love my dad. You don't know how bad I wanted my dad to be my dad. I actually got in fights in school to defend my father, who had never done anything for me. I loved him. Oh, I hated him. I loved him fiercely, but I hated him with a greater fierceness. It was ruining my life. Number 4, forgiveness is a choice to adjust. You gotta stop doing what you've been doing. You can't play the tapes. You can't keep rehearsing it. You can't keep keeping it fresh. You can't live with that vengeful spirit anymore. You gotta let it go. Does anybody else feel like breaking into a Frozen song? John says no. Yeah, he's got a little girl at home. He doesn't want to go to Frozen. All right.
It's a good song.
What's this Frozen?
What is Frozen?
Yes. You're not going to forget, but forgiveness changes what and how we remember. Catch this, okay? Forgiveness, you can't forget, but forgiveness is going to change what you remember. Okay? When I forgive, what I'm doing is I'm not remembering the offense anymore. I'm remembering that I chose to forgive them. That's your point of remembrance. I chose to forgive them. Man, this was a mantra with me. Every time, no, I forgave him. I didn't feel like it. I don't want to. He doesn't deserve it. But God, I forgive him. You can't keep playing those tapes. You can't keep rehearsing that speech that you so want to give. I think it's interesting, the passage that in Luke 6:27 through, I think it's in your notes, Luke 6:27 through 36, Jesus teaches about forgiveness, but he starts it off with, but if you're willing to listen, he says. And this is what I will close up with you about forgiveness, okay? No one is saying you weren't wronged. No one is downplaying the horror of your life. No. If you weren't hurt, what do you got to forgive? No, it sucked. It was bad. It was wrong. But if you have ears to listen and hear this, it doesn't justify a simple response in my heart. I have to admit that it happened. It did happen. I think my word there was acknowledge, right? You have to absolve. Then admit your part to it. And make some adjustments. That last one is sometimes the hardest because this is where the whole idea of forgiving your enemies, being good to your enemies, treating your enemies right. On this last page, it's not a 2-page thing here, I've got a whole list of bullets there of just my idea of some applications of this stuff. A choice to adjust. This is what it looks like. None of that's easy. If you don't adjust your posture towards the offender, they will continue to offend you ad infinitum. It'll just keep happening. You'll never put an end to it. You'll never be able to let the sun go down in that chapter and move on to a new one. Okay, I'm done. Come on up, Paul. Woo! I feel like I want to say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for your pain, for your hurt, your wound. I'm sorry. The person you need to say that to you may never say it to you. Well, let's move on. Let's be well. Let's get everything out of our lives that's keeping us limiting our relationship with God and others and even ourselves. Well, any questions?
I sort of had a question, but I think one of the last things you said kind of answered it. When you said, remember that you chose to forgive them. When you think about the crime, when the crime is brought up to you, remember that you chose to forgive them instead of remembering the crime, which I think might have been my answer.
Okay.
With forgiveness, being a touchy subject, you can have the best intentions and tell yourself, you know what, I don't have to tolerate this, I don't have to forget it, but I will forgive them. And let's say you do it, but for how long? What if those feelings creep back? If you're angry again in a day or a week or a year, you know, I mean, you just start the process all over again and be like, okay, I'll forgive them a second
Actually, that's
time.
a question. I would like to answer that because I'm going to say no. This is what you do, okay? This is what you say. You say, no, I'm not going to forgive him again because I already did it.
Yeah.
I stand in the decision I already made. I forgave them. I don't have to do it again. I did it. Because if you keep redoing it, it's going to feel like failure. It's going to come out like failure. You're going to go, oh, why can't I get this right? No, you did get it right. It still hurts. They're still offending. Now, you might have to forgive for a new offense. But, well, you know, but that thing, if you did it, it doesn't matter what it feels like. You made a choice, you told God, you forgive him, done. Transaction solved.
Yeah.
Stand in that ground.
That's really good.
Stand in that ground. Good question. Very good question. Oh, I'll sit back down.
No. That's so good.
Anybody?
I just want to say that, like, within that, like, for Char's answer, like, there's so much healing that comes after forgiveness. And a lot of people think that forgiveness, there's healing in forgiveness, and there is, but I think that there's a healing process.
Yes.
And forgiveness is,
Yes.
like, the transaction that happens right away, but then there's healing that needs to come in that. So don't get the two confused that, like, oh, I need to keep forgiving, and then you're going to have this,
I think
go
that's...
through the healing process.
That's profound, Lisa. That's
Yes.
it's exactly the way it works. It's a process. And what I would say, you know, for what Lisa's telling you is that every time you go, no, I choose to forgive him, it'll get a little better. Every time you go, no, I forgave already, I won't do it again. I will choose to think differently and to adjust, okay? It gets a little better. It gets a little better.
Scary stuff because, I mean, when it's so deep and they're, you know, the tallies rack up, I feel like that healing process could take the rest of my life until the day I die. I may never, ever feel like I'm okay.
And that's very, yeah. I know that sitting here right now, I do not, I have no argument for that other than to say that it feels that way, but that's not the truth.
And let me add to that too. The encouragement is that we don't do it alone.
Oh, yeah.
We don't do it alone. A lot of this stuff, you need other people, like what you talked about last session in terms of getting help and walking through that process. If you try to carry this stuff by yourself, you'll get lost in the forest.
Yeah.
And so it really is so important to have other people around, because I always imagine, I don't know why I have this really poor view of the nurses station, but I always imagine this nurses station where there's ladies around and they're giving each other horrible advice, right? And it's stuff that they would never want somebody to say to them in the moment, but they're giving it out like it's this just... And so the reality is we need to be surrounded by people that help us to stay the course. And like here, there's this authenticity issue that I have with you now, Kerry, because I know you've walked through some deep forgiveness. And so I know, okay, I can go talk to Kerry, and I know he has walked this road and he gets it, where somebody else who hasn't walked that road may not get that and hasn't made the right decisions along the way, hasn't processed it. And I think there's some real validity to being around somebody who has a mentor, or somebody who's a counselor, or somebody who has walked that road and can say, hey, I understand where you're at. And I really love what you said earlier in terms of we don't have to do these things, but we do if we want to heal. We do if we don't want to carry it with us. There's no option for us. It's the thing that we have to do to get it right. And so that there's only, like, I think the enemy tempts us to say, just stay in your mess. Just stay in your mess. Just live in it and wallow in it. And the truth of the scripture, the light that comes in, says you can't stay here if you want to heal. You can't stay here. You are in the fight of your life.
Yeah.
And there's only one thing that you have to do to win it. And you can win it, but don't surrender it. And there's such a temptation to surrender to the pain and to those things. And if you do, the thing is you will carry it and you will be tortured by it for the rest of your life. And so sometimes it has to get uglier and it has to get really painful before it gets better. Yeah. And that's
it's like, you know, I'm talking about that open wound, so you have this wound, right? But have you ever had a doctor come and do the disinfecting thing? Man, they're doing all kinds of stuff in it, pouring stuff in it, and they're digging, you know, whatever, getting whatever bits and pieces out of it and everything. Yeah. Man, the cleansing process is worse than the wound. It gets like that. It really does. But you have to dig back in that. And I think in my story, my pastoral mentor actually pastored this church years ago. That God used to grow part of the size that you see here now. If he hadn't told me his story and hadn't shared what it looked like for him growing up, and I realized, oh, he does know what it feels like. I don't know if I ever processed it. I don't know if I couldn't do it alone.
And the alone thing isn't just other people. Don't do it without Jesus. The Holy Spirit is the comforter. One of the primary roles of the Holy Spirit in our life is to come and comfort us. And the reason we need comfort is not because life will be easy, it's because life will be difficult. There is a primary function. There's this lie that we believe when we accept Jesus. Life is going to be this nice, easy road now. And the Holy Spirit has been given to us to be a comforter and a counselor. And so we need the active work of the Holy Spirit. Jesus, the Bible says, a bruised reed he will not break. In other words, he understands how much, there's only some of this stuff we can bite off at a time. Right? I find too that forgiveness is measured in the amount that I can bite off at any given time. Like I am taking steps toward forgiveness. I haven't reached it. I think it's a journey too.
Yeah, it is.
It's
a lifelong journey, really.
It's this journey of, okay, there's so much, I am not ready to stomach the whole enchilada. Yeah. But I can do this part. This is what I can do right now. This is the part that I can handle. And then what you'll discover is taste and see that the Lord is good. Right. Taste and see. So I think there's...
Yeah. I remember the idea of God's grace. Have you ever looked at this big long project and kind of looked down the road and go, I'm never going to get there? One of the reasons is because you don't have the grace to get there. You're measuring with what you have today to try to get to this point down here. Of course that's not going to work. God's grace is for the next step. He will give you the grace for the next step. Yeah. You don't have, you look down there and you go, I can't do that, and you're probably right. You can't do it. But you don't even have the grace from God from it yet. When you get there, you'll need it. Yeah, and that's why it's a choice.
And not wanting to clean out your wound, not wanting things to get worse before they get better.
Yeah, and that's a very real fear that I understand. And I wish I had a really great little thing I could say, you know, but it's a choice. I see some questions.
Let's not forget in all of this that the enemy wants us to never, ever forgive anyone for anything. And, you know, like you said, you know, the bitterness leaks and it infects everyone around you. And, you know, now we have this wonderful thing called Facebook where we can, like...
We can leak all over the world.
Everywhere. To everyone we know in a split second. and rally everyone behind you. So now your bitterness becomes everyone else's bitterness. And it's like now this person's being attacked, and and the enemy loves this because we can't lead people to Christ when we're attacking each other.
Right.
So that's a huge point to keep in mind, is that we're fighting that battle,
and that's part of why it gets a little tough sometimes, because the enemy's pushing back,
and it feels good.
And we talk about confirmation by opposition. Okay, you can confirm you're going in the right direction. Will and I are talking about it this week. The opposition we felt to this weekend. I can tell you stories of what happened this week, man. It was crazy stuff going on. Because the enemy was pushing back. Now he didn't want you here. You think he wants you to forgive somebody? So, good point. Lisa, I saw your hand.
Oh, it was just, I was just like, something that helped me like really get through forgiveness was like knowing that like by his wounds we are healed, and understanding like that the healing process that comes after that is through the cross, and ultimately like understanding the importance of the cross and saying like being able to look at the cross and say, there's nothing that someone has done to me that I can't forgive, because I have done way worse to Jesus Christ, and he sat there on the cross and forgave me for every sin that I've done to him. And so like by understanding the cross and his like by his wounds we are healed, and that's where we can say that healing can come from.
Yeah, preach it, sister. That's great. I saw a hand here before I respond.
I kind of feel the complete opposite of everybody else. It's so hard for them to forgive, but I'm the most forgiving. I've gone through so much in my personal life and my marriage that I just keep forgiving and forgiving and forgiving. And I kind of feel like I keep doing it, but when will that end? Like, for me, like, I don't feel forced to forgive. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like it's so easy for me to do it, and everyone's like, Val, you need to stop being so forgiving, because it's like they're walking all over me.
Right.
But I don't see that. I just feel like I'm going to forgive you, like Lisa said. In my own life, God forgives us of all that we've done.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's what should happen. I should forgive.
Right.
And it's so easy for me to do, but then here I am getting like stomped on over and over and over again.
Val, when you looked at the list of all the things that forgiveness is not, did any of those stick out to you as significant?
Well, the thing is, like, number 5, it said forgiveness is not trust. But here I am forgiving and trusting again.
Right.
And that's my issue, is like, I'm going to trust you that it's going to be different.
Yeah.
So you're having a collision between what you think forgiveness is and what forgiveness is. And I think the tension that you're feeling and what other people are saying to you, I think people intuitively are seeing, hey, maybe that's not what forgiveness is. And maybe they don't have all the right picture of it, but somewhere intuitively they're seeing, well, maybe there's some things that should change about what your view of forgiveness is. And then maybe that can help the process, because I see that happen all the time with child abusers or abusers in general. And it's a codependency thing, and so this is a way deeper conversation than what we have time for, but codependency, there's some things on here that are very difficult for us to stomach down because of kind of what our view is, and so we allow ourselves to be in abusive situations that God does not intend for us to be in. And so there's some other real work that comes in the other end of that is a way different conversation.
Yeah. And the reality might be that you aren't forgiving.
Okay.
Now, I'm not going to say that that's true. I'm just saying, because of what he's saying, because you have the wrong idea of forgiveness, you're doing those wrong things thinking you're forgiven, and you're burying some stuff, and you really haven't forgiven.
It may be more tolerance than it is forgiveness, which is different.
Yeah.